Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So, for a while now, I've wanted to learn how to make my own currency, my own coins, clever bucks, if you will. And since we're going to be running a business in the LARP that we're going to, I thought it was a perfect opportunity / excuse for me to give this a shot. The thing is, there are blessedly few videos actually showing how to do this thing. And most of them employ things like CNC machines to get it done, right? I don't have that. So I got frustrated and I decide anything worth doing, it's worth overdoing, damn it. So today I'm gonna make this video for you where I've compiled a bunch of different techniques kind of on the sliding scale of like how expensive it is versus how easy it is to do. Though these for sure aren't the only ways to make coins. I mean, depending on what you want to consider as your currency, you can really make anything. You can trade in M&Ms, it doesn't really matter, you can figure it out. But these are the way I found, so without much further ado, let's jump right into it and level up this skill. Okay, so as I said, there is a very sliding scale on how easy it is to get these things done versus how expensive they are. I.e., the more expensive you go, the easier it is. Versus kind of the lower budget method, you're gonna have to put some muscle work into it. So we're gonna start with the expensive, easy version, and then we're gonna work our way to hammers and metal. Now, most of you are gonna see things like a CNC machine or whatever actually cutting stuff out of metal. I don't have access to one of those, and I don't have any inclination on buying one right this second. But I thought it would be a creative opportunity to use my newest toy and today's sponsor, the Creality Falcon 2 Laser Engraver. Again, your more expensive option for sure, but it's gonna be way easier than anything else. Now for the coin blanks, the metal I'm actually gonna be making these coins out of, I decided to just use plain old washers. They're cheap, abundant, and I don't mind the hole in the middle. It's actually kind of a cool feature to my money. Now the design I'm gonna be slapping on this bad boy is this one here, made by my partner and resident pain in the ass crow, Maddie. So first thing I did was pop this design into Lightburn and size it so it was the exact same diameter as my washer. Once that was good to go, I used the Falcon 2 to etch my design into the wood that my laser is sitting on. This not only gives me a chance to look at the design, but it leaves the exact shape so I know where to place my washer. Just as an aside, the Falcon 2 has a 22 watt laser, it's actually really beefy for a diode laser, and I'm not used to it yet, so I almost straight up burned like through my wood into my floor. Really gonna have to learn to dial that in, that thing's no joke. Now I read that metal will actually etch better if you put some kind of a substrate on it that'll stop the laser from kind of bouncing off the reflective material. And a lot of people actually just recommend the soot from a candle. Anyways, with my washer in place, I just pushed the go button and let this bad boy do its job. And this is what I was talking about when I said ease of use. This bad boy can etch at 25,000 millimeters a minute, which is ultra fast, so engraving this coin was done in just a couple of minutes. And already look at how cool this thing looks. Then when I wipe away the soot, it's even better. The image is super crisp and clear, and since I have the mark on the wood, I can just flip it over and put it right back in place and just start it again. This time I didn't add any soot just to see if it makes a difference, and I'm gonna be honest, once it was done, I really didn't notice anything. Both sides came out looking amazing. And again, this thing was ultra fast, so cool. Again, a lot of you might not be in the market for a machine like a laser or something, but honestly, this is part of that sliding scale. If you wanna do a lot of these en masse, I would totally recommend getting something like this, because it's gonna save you a whole bunch of time. Not that you need an extra special reason to get a laser, I'm just saying, if you're on the fence, I think you should get this laser. I love this thing, I can tell you firsthand, this one, the only one I've tried, works great, so if you're interested, link in the description below. Okay, so that's the first method. It's time to move on to something a bit more primal, where man and hammer come together to bend metal to their will. Okay, so basically the way I'm envisioning this working is we're going to make two dies. We're gonna try to mint a coin. So we have two dies, right? One on the bottom, one on the top, and we put our coin blank in between the two, and we smack it with a hammer to get the indents onto that piece of coin blank. And as I said, on that sliding scale, it's gonna be more work, significantly less expensive, but honestly, it wasn't that bad to do. Now, for my dies, I started with these big old bolts that I got from the Tractor Supply Company. Not gonna lie to you, I don't remember the exact size of these bolts. I was more worried about the top of it because that's my working surface. So I just got the ones with like 1.5 inches worth of space to work with. Though these had some raised lettering on the top, so the first thing I had to do was get rid of that. This is really easy to do though. I just stuck some sandpaper on my table and then ran the top of those bolts across it until it became nice and smooth, giving me this perfect working surface. Now, this coin's gonna have a special purpose. Now, though we're running a completely legitimate business, there's gonna be times where we're gonna have to send a bounty after people to collect some money. You know, legitimately. Luckily, there's a group of mercenaries / warriors named the Jaegers who are totally up for this task. Basically, our thought was to make them a coin that would basically give them the right to hunt down somebody for us. Kind of like the black spot on Treasure Island. For this, Maddie made me this badass design right here. Has kind of a piratey, you're screwed design to it. Now I'm gonna tell you up front, this next bit that I'm doing was a little bit experimental, but I'm showing it to you because it's actually another way you could totally make a coin. But basically, instead of carving my design into the metal, I wanted to see if I could actually electroplate it in. This would have the advantage of making my lines really smooth and honestly let me just kind of be lazy watching it happen. Now I've covered electro etching in this video here, but it's worth going over again. So basically, I went ahead and cut those images out of some vinyl, which I had cut with my Cricut cutter. You don't have to use vinyl. In that video I pointed to, I show you a different way to be able to get an image on. But anyways, I stuck that vinyl onto the surface of my bolt, making sure everything was as centered as possible. Then I went ahead and hit that with some black spray paint. Once that dried, I was able to remove my vinyl. So basically, when you're electro etching, anything that's covered either by paint or by nail polish or whatever you're gonna use, anything that's covered is gonna stay. And anything that's bare metal is actually gonna etch away. And since these are stamps, I'm gonna want things to be negative. So the things that on my coin I wanna stick out, on the negative I need to be in. I need those to etch away. Now to actually make this etching work, I need to make sure that bolt is conductive. So to do that, I just hit the edges of it with a file to remove some of the paint that it had and expose the bare metal. This will give me a nice point of contact to actually make that connection. To help with that, I took some copper wire and wrapped it around the bolt head, twisting it tight so it makes contact with all those bare metal spots. This is gonna give me a nice point to attach my battery to. The next thing we need to make this process work is an electrolyte mixture. This is basically just water with a boatload of salt dissolved into it. The last real component we need is a battery to make this whole thing work. I'm using this 12-volt car jumper, but you can go ahead and use just a 9-volt battery if you want. It'll just be a little bit slower. These I connected to some alligator clips just so it was easier to work with. The positive side, I went ahead and connected to my copper wire hanging off the bolt. For the negative side, I decided to use this big old washer on top of a piece of flashing metal that I folded up to make this little sleigh. That I connected the alligator clip to as well. I did this basically because I'm lazy. The weight of that washer is gonna hold that metal down flat on the top of the bolt, making it so I don't have to stand there and hold the thing. Now I simply put a cotton pad into my electrolyte mixture and then rest that on the surface of my bolt. Then just lay my little sled on top of that and start the electro etching process. As the current flows through, electrons are stolen from the steel, changing them into soluble iron ions, which results in everywhere unprotected slowly getting etched away. As you can see, within just a minute when I remove my little sled here, there's a lot of action taking place. Every once in a while, I just had to wipe away some of what I'm assuming is essentially rust from my image, and then replace the cotton pad with a fresh one. Now, as I said, this was super experimental, but it was actually working really well. Until my paint decided to start coming off. I don't know why, it just kind of started chipping away, so I needed to change tack. But I still thought this was cool to show you because look at the etching on this bolt. That is so clean. This alone would be a cool way to make coins. Just slap your vinyl or whatever you're gonna use onto your coin blanks and then etch the image in. It looks slick, it comes out super clean, and it's really easy to do. So this is our little bonus way of making a coin here. That's not what we're shooting for right now, so carrying on, I busted out some of my carbide bits on my Dremel and just started carving away all the spaces I wanted to be lower. This is actually really easy to do. Those carbide bits have no problem removing the metal and it took no time at all. And as you can see with my test piece of clay here, it leaves exactly the kind of stamp that I'm looking for. That's only part of the equation because although I have the dies, in order for them to work, I need to hit them with a hammer. I need a way to keep the bits all aligned up with a piece of metal in between them so that I can hit it with a hammer without them falling all over the place. Luckily, I had this 2x4 of oak kicking around, which I just drilled a 1/2-inch hole into. That's just big enough to accept the shank of the bolts. On the other chunk of wood, I made a hole 1.5 inches wide so that I can fit the whole head of the bolts into it. Now, so whatever bolt I put into the bottommost one doesn't move around on me, I wanted to cut it in so that the head of it actually inset into the wood a little bit. To get this done, I just traced around it with a pencil and then went back in with a chisel to remove about 1/4 inch worth of wood. This makes it so that bolt sits nice and tight and doesn't dance around on me while I'm working. Finally, with that bolt in place, I just marked where it comes out of the wood with my hacksaw and then got to cutting that the rest of the way off. So now you can get a feel for how this whole assembly is going to work. Where the bottommost bolt seats into this block, and then the other board goes on top of that, which will help line up the topmost bolt, which I also cut short. This way they land right on top of each other. And that bottom bolt is flush cut, so it doesn't have any room to absorb the blow. And this top one, I'll strike with a hammer to actually make the imprint. To make sure there's as little absorption of the force as possible, I positioned this metal plate directly over a leg of my table, so that there was a straight line to the ground. Then I lined up my blocks together and locked them in place with a clamp. Now for my first attempt, the metal I decided to go with was some of this aluminum bar stock that I had laying around. I just cut a rough shape that would fit into the space that I had. Then I heated up with my torch just to soften it up a bit. Once it was good and hot, I dropped this sucker into the hole, lined up my die, and smashed the hell out of it with a hammer. Low tech, but look at how good this impression came out. Oh, that is so badass. The backside of it didn't come out as clean, so I made another attempt, but the same thing seemed to happen. My only thoughts are that the ends of the swords might be a little too close together, kind of bridging out that force a little bit, or that I'm a sad little weak man, not swinging my hammer strong enough. Couldn't be that, not at all. But I don't care, because I still think that came out really cool. And after hitting it with a file to really round off those edges, this thing is a straight up badass pirate coin. To put the finishing touches on it, I just added a black wash and then sanded away all those highlights, which made all the detail come out and actually made those swords way more visible. Now you can't tell me that doesn't look dope. Now I know what you're saying, but clever, it's aluminum, it's a soft metal, and you've got sad little wimp arms. Of course it's gonna take shape. First and foremost, your words hurt. Just be a little nicer. Doesn't take any extra effort. Just saying. Secondly, though, I also wanted to see if this would work with steel, so I cut another piece, this time out of steel. I heat this sucker up until it was red hot with my torch and gave it a good old smack. And yup, this thing works fantastic. Again, the back is not clear at all. But I'm willing to wager if I put this on a more secure surface that won't absorb as much of the blow as this table and hit it with a bigger hammer, that I can make this indent work. The answer to all of life's problems. A bigger hammer, yes. Alright, so that was our second foray into coin making, but I'm not gonna lie, that was a lot more fun. And although it was a lot more work, it wasn't too bad, to be honest with you. You can totally bust out one of those like dies in maybe, I don't know, like an hour or so. And then you're just smacking away making coins. Not only that, but between the two coins, there's the feel, right? So the etching is actually, it's flat. It doesn't have much of a feel to it at all. Whereas in the stamped one, like I can feel the shape of the skull and I can feel the shape of the little swords. There's just something about that raised image that really feels like a coin. All right, so I have one more for you. Well, I technically have two. One's a bit of a bonus one, I realized in the middle of making this one. But again, this one's gonna take the most work to kind of set up that sliding scale, right? But it is super satisfying to do. For this one, we're gonna make a mold, and then we're gonna pour molten metal into said mold. Now, I know a lot of you at home are rolling your eyes because you're like, listen, I don't have a foundry. I'm not gonna sit there and melt metals to do this thing. There's a lot of extra work. To which I say, shh, Clever got you, baby. You can do this on your stovetop if you wanted to. Super easy. That was creepy, admittedly creepy. We can walk that back. We'll just forget that ever happened. So first things first, we're gonna need to make a little like model coin to make our mold around. Now I could use one of the coins I've already made, but I'm gonna assume that you're starting with not the coin you want, right? The whole purpose of this is you wanna start making coins and you don't have it yet. So my easy solution to this is actually to bust out some of this super sculpey clay. This stuff's super cool because you can just kind of work with it, and once you're done, you can stick it in the oven and it'll harden to be like plastic. Now I use this little pasta maker to make it nice and flat, but that's because I'm pressed for time. Get it? Pressed for time? Oh, you're here all day. The more of these I have, the funnier I get. But seriously, you can just kind of smash this between two books to get the same level of flatness if you want. Now to make my coin shape, I just use the edge of this shot glass, which I just helpfully emptied. This gives me a nice coin-shaped round. From here, you can get your molding skills on and just kind of carve out a little shape if you want. If you don't like it, it's clay. You just wipe it away and you start again. Not a big deal. Though again, your boy's short on time, so I'm just gonna go ahead and use the stamps that I've already made. I just went ahead and stuck my clay onto one of them, and then lined it up on top of the other and used my mallet to lightly tap the indentation into place. This was really easy to do, and it came out with a perfect little shape on both sides. As an aside though, if you know exactly what design you want to mill out a bunch of these things, we actually learned recently that on Etsy, you can get like the wax seal stamps for like $15 a pop. You just send them your design and they'll make it for you. Just saying, it's cheap and it's easy. Anyways, now that I have that shape into my Sculpey clay, I threw it into the oven at 275 for 30 minutes, and it came out with this hard, perfect little coin. All I really had to do was clean up the edges with some sandpaper. And this is where our bonus little extra coin comes into play. Because who says your coin needs to be made out of metal? Let's say you need to furnish a currency for a whole event and you need to bust out like hundreds of these things cheaply. There's no reason you can't make these things out of clay, bake them, and you have them here. To make them look extra cool, all I did was paint it with a layer of black paint, which honestly already looks pretty cool by itself. But then to give it a nice metallic sheen, I busted out some of this rub and buff here, which is a super pigmented waxy finish that you can just rub onto the surface of the thing. It gives it a super realistic metallic look, and by going back over it with just your fingertips, the oil from your skin helps give it a nice little patina. Now look at how slick that looks. It'll cost you barely anything to do, and you can bust out a huge amount super fast. Especially if you get, like I said, a little stamp to do them with. And seriously, from a distance, like, one is metal, one is clay. You don't know, it's awesome, it's great. Okay, moving on from that little side thought, let's get to melting some metal. Now the metal I'm using for this, I got off of Amazon, and it's a super low melt point bismuth alloy. This stuff melts at only 158 degrees Fahrenheit, which is easily reached right on your stovetop. And for my mold material, I'm just using some of this easy mold that I got from Michaels. It's a 2-part silicone mold that has a heat resistance of up to 400 degrees, which is perfect for what we're using it for. All I had to do was take equal amounts of both parts and smash them all together until I've got a nice uniform color. This I stuck into the bottom of a little plastic carton that once held my nails. Then I pushed one of my clay coins into it about halfway down onto the rim of the coin. I also added a couple of little dowel cutoffs that are going to give me channels in the mold. One for pouring metal into, and the other one so air can escape. When you're making a mold like this, it's important that you have a second hole for air to escape, or else it's going to kind of cavitate and make like a big air bubble inside. Finally, I pushed in some little indentations to work as registration marks to help both the top and bottom of my mold line up correctly. Then I left it for a half an hour or so to cure. Once that was hardened, I busted out some Vaseline and smeared it all over the surface just to make sure the second half of the mold didn't stick. Now for some reason, the footage of me actually sticking on the second half of the mold didn't happen. I must have not pushed the button or something. But I did all the same things. I just kind of mushed up the two parts of it together and then I stuck it on top of the mold. Not a big deal. But once that was all cured up, the whole thing came apart super easily and the detail was perfect. The only extra work I had to do was getting in there with my razor knife to cut the openings of those spouts just a little bit more so there was plenty of space for me to pour my metal into. Next, I sprinkled the whole thing with a layer of talcum powder and shook off all the excess. This is just going to make it easier for my metal to come off the molds once it's done. Now to make pouring the metal into the thing easier, I just sandwiched it between two boards and set it into my clamp to keep it upright and together. I also added a second clamp on top of it to make sure the mold didn't spread open. Now it's time to get to the good stuff. Let's melt some metal. To do this, I'm just using this small electric burner and a tiny cast iron pot that I've had forever, inside of which I just put my bismuth alloy to melt. It probably took only about 8 minutes to go from a solid bar to all T1000. Once it was liquefied, I just used this little ladle here to scoop all of the dross off of the top, which is just the imperfections in the metal. Then I slowly poured some into my mold until the overflow came out of both spouts. I also tapped the mold just a little bit to make sure any air bubbles made their way to the top. Then after about 10 minutes of waiting, it was time to open this thing up and see how we did. Little spouts are thin enough that they just kind of break right off. But check out this detail! Look how good that coin came out! And after a little bit of cleaning up, look how cool and shiny this thing is! That is straight up a metal coin! And they're not perfect, I really dig that. It makes them feel older. Like if you look at actual ancient coins, none of them came out perfect. They all have different weird little imperfections. Again, I did a quick black wash just to bring out some more of those details and make it look older. And I love this thing. It is by far the heaviest coin out of the bunch, and it's just so cool. Like, listen to this. Here's the stamped coin, the bismuth coin. It's so heavy. Okay, so my verdict out of the myriad of ways to make coins. I'm not gonna lie, it's tough because it really depends on what you're going for. Like, hammering it out was probably the most fun. I think that was really cool. But if I had to bust out like 400 of these things, that would get old crazy fast. That was a lot of work. And the laser's fantastic. Like, if I'm doing a whole bunch of these in bulk, I can set that sucker and forget it. Walk away in like, I don't know, in 20 minutes, 200 of them are done. But they lack kind of the feel that a regular coin has, that raised feeling, right? Though if you were in a cyberpunk LARP, I'm not gonna lie, that would probably be pretty dope. You can get way more detail that way. Then of course the mold was super fun. The bismuth is super easy to work with, nice and heavy, though I am worried at like 158 degrees or whatever the melting temperature is. If I leave this on my dashboard, is it just gonna be like a pile of metal when I get back on like a hot summer day? I don't know. But the beauty of all these techniques, once you understand them, is you can totally mix and match them. Like maybe you use the bismuth to make all of your actual like coin blinks, so you mold your rounds. And then you use the die technique to actually hammer the shapes into them. Or you use a laser engraver on wood to make that indentation nice and deep so that the model you use to make a mold is absolutely perfect. Same if you have a CNC machine instead or a 3D printer, these all fill that same kind of space. Though honestly, in a pinch, I kind of love the thought of just using washers. It sounds dumb, but hear me out. They come in a bunch of different type of materials. So you can have like one that's made out of brass. You can have one that's made out of steel. A copper one, and each one is supposed to be like a different denomination of your currency. Maybe you hit it on a grinder and you make it more like octagonal and cool shapes or something. If you're going for easy, that's pretty easy. But seriously, use your imagination. Maybe your culture trades in shells instead. Or perhaps there's a really, really rare nut that only grows in a certain area, and the shells from that are currency. Humans are silly, and all currency is the thing we all agree has value. As long as in your game you agree it has value, it's currency. Anyways, I hope you found this useful if you were trying to figure out how to make coins, and if not, I hope you at least enjoyed my shenanigans here. If you did, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Ooh, one last thing. I really want to start highlighting a lot of your projects. Like, a lot of you are on the Discord, which, honestly, everyone on the Discord, you guys are friggin' incredible with the stuff you post. But I want to make more of an effort to highlight you more often, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding some pictures of you guys to my community tab here on the channel. Basically, we're going to take pictures that you post there on the Discord, and we're going to highlight them and show how awesome you guys are. So if you want to show off your skill or something you're working on, definitely join the Discord and send it there. I'm so excited to see what you're working on. I can't wait. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you. You made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It is a great way to support this channel. Another great way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are the members of my Patreon, and honestly, without them, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. They wholesale fund this whole enterprise, and honestly, they are my life's blood. And a special thank you to our newest high tier level Patreon member, Jacob Converset. Thank you so much. Again, it means the world to me that you like what we do here enough to help support us. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Or you can watch one of these here that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that'll help too. I'm just gonna sit here and try to learn how to walk a coin across my knuckles. Almost got it. Oh, nope. You know, this might take a bit. I'm not very good. We'll figure it out though. Shit. Shit. Oh, back. No. Going. No. Ha ha! This. It's so heavy.